And I think it's appropriate and good that we take this time to acknowledge the lands we all stand on today and have been called home by the indigenous peoples of the Salish Sea since time immemorial. We recognize tribal sovereignty and that this place holds special spiritual, cultural, and personal significance for Indian tribes and the First Nations. And with that, I'd like to then turn it over to Richard. You can sort of say where we are with Skagit Salmon Science Series, and then a little bit of an update and overview of the status of projects current and soon to happen. Richard.
Thanks, John, and thanks everybody for being here, and happy holidays. Just kind of a quick review of what we've done to date for the Skagit Salmon Science Series and where you all can find that information, and just a quick preview of how we think we'll land it over the early meetings of 2023. Here is our website, skagitwatershed.org, easy to remember. And under the resources tab, you'll find a subpage called the Skagit Watershed Workshops page. And at the top of the page is this Skagit Salmon Science Series of resources. And so we did have 4 meetings focused on this topic last year, this year, during the last year. So first one was February 23rd, and we really stepped back and covered the Skagit salmon management picture. And that was writ large across the watershed, all the species, with some specific Chinook examples. And that was directly related to Chapter 6 of the Skagit Chinook Recovery Plan, the harvest side of that. So there's video links here, so you can watch the whole meeting series. And there's also all the slide decks are available as well, linked for that first meeting. The second meeting was May 4th. We really covered, Eric Beamer covered the entire Chinook Recovery Plan, all the chapters at an outline level. And there's the video here, and there's also the slide decks for those of you who might be new. And we do have quite a few new people coming into the watershed and working on the mission. So appreciate that. And hopefully you'll use this as a resource. The third installment in June was specifically about the status of Skagit estuary restoration, and it covered the science pieces in the recovery plan and some of the work that's gone on to date. So again, those videos and slide decks are here. Not only did it cover chapter 11, which is called the tidal delta rearing chapter, but also broached into chapter 12, which covered the pocket estuaries in Skagit Bay and further south in the Whidbey Basin. So that's available for folks. And then the last meeting we had at our annual lunch in September, it was about habitat. It covered all the watershed pieces that are broached in Chapter 1 and Chapter 8. And then there was a question and answer session, which, I definitely want to apologize to the presenters and to the members that we had to cut that a little bit short because there was a lot of good information there. But the Q&A slides are available here at the bottom of this section at the Skagit Watershed Workshops page. In particular,
I'd like to acknowledge Greg Hood for getting in touch with me and answering a bunch of questions.
It's nice to hear your voice, Gary. And I'm appreciative of you saying that. I know you spent a couple hours with Greg talking through lots of different pieces. And I understood that there were actually many conversations like that have been sort of organically happening at the urging of this information being presented and refreshed for people, and the openness of the scientists to try to explain the work they're doing in a way that the rest of us can grasp it and utilize it. Finally, that was what we've accomplished in the last year. Our goal is to complete the rest of what Eric Beamer refers to as the action chapters of the Chinook Recovery Plan, and specifically Chapter 9 and 10 are about spawning habitat strategies in the upper watershed condition and sediment hydrology and how it flows into the system and could impact spawning habitat. And then Chapter 10 is the freshwater rearing habitat about main stem, floodplain, side channels, edge habitat, and areas for potential actions. So there's interest in that. I hope we'll be covering that in the first meeting or two of 2023. And then I guess there's an open question as to whether or not you all want to hear about Chapter 7, the Habitat Protection Strategies chapter. And that's kind of reflecting the basic assumption in the recovery plan that we're trying to protect the functions we already have, in addition to a bit of restoration to keep the fish viable. So that's our goal. And with that information, our hope is to engage more governments and stakeholders in dialogue, just as Gary alluded to as an example there, for us to keep working together to understand the science and how we best utilize it to benefit the community. So that's the overview of the Salmon Science Series. We wanted to make sure we didn't pause that, even though it's the end of the year and we won't be presenting on it again until March. Those dates have not been announced yet. Any comments or additions or concerns or questions?
Yeah, or anything you'd like to see that maybe Richard didn't highlight there, thoughts that you have. And a thought that has always come to my mind is around the Salmon Science Series is perhaps towards at the end, a time where there's less presentation and more opportunity for dialogue, discussion, looking forward. If folks think that's a good idea or have different ideas, we would love to hear from you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, John and John and Richard, this is Brandon Rusin, and I appreciate you opening the floor in that way, and Gary kind of introduced kind of how I'll approach this, and that is that the key to making sure that the science series is effective is to make sure that we're continuing to follow up or utilize the information there to have conversations about very difficult to understand information and conditions, and how to help those folks who maybe don't follow the science all the time to appreciate and understand kind of the context, but then also for those same people to use their expertise on the landscape to help inform conversations. So I guess what I'm saying is, I would sure appreciate moving forward, maybe we use this science series to generate additional roundtable conversations or question and answer sessions that the community can participate in. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Great. Okay, good. I mean, I think it could be useful. And I think that's a good idea, Brandon. Maybe there's some, nuggets, elements within what's been presented, what will be presented that, like you said, maybe needs a bit of a deeper dive, or at least more opportunity for sorting out the questions about a topic. So folks,
I'm not suggesting it has to happen in an open forum or anything. And Gary Jones alluded to it, is that sometimes it can happen in smaller settings or whatever. So
exactly. Yeah, it could be right. It could be a combination.
I had something I wanted to mention. I'm just thinking, maybe I'm thinking out loud with you guys a little bit, but I know there's a lot of resources coming up for maybe fish projects. And I'm not a biologist, I'm more of an engineer, but I certainly appreciate all of the information that my biologist friends give me on fish and how I can do things. But is there some sort of a side committee or side group or some way that we can work together to tap into some of these dollars that are coming down the pike for fish projects for those of us in jurisdictions that might have some decent fish projects that need to get done?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, Mike. I know I'll put my Puget Sound partnership hat on for a moment. certainly the partnership is trying to do that. They actually are in the process of bringing on a few folks to literally that be their job, sort of understand the the complexity of these different acts that are there, and then be able to help folks here in the region put together what needs to be put together is to get potential access to that funding. So partnership is one, but as this goes forward, I think we should be cognizant of opportunities to make people either aware of information or find ways to get people together so that people can benefit from what others have learned and what, but just by working together may make it easier. So really good point.
And John, I think that would be great. Anything that you guys, especially those of you that are into the fish, can help me to understand about how I can do things better to benefit my community and our overall watershed, the Skagit watershed. I know that ESA is the listed fish are the top priority, which we mainly have coho in most of the streams in our city, so they're not ESA listed. But anything that you guys could help me with to figure out how to benefit the overall system, I would sure appreciate. And I think we could get a lot of bang for the buck for everybody involved. So yeah, thank you for thinking about that.
Okay, you're welcome.
Well, and thanks for putting that out there, Blaine. I think we have to work together on these things. And if you have a few ideas, we could sit down and talk about them, and I could point you to people and resources that you might be able to find some partnerships with. And we've just done that, kind of working together with DFW and the tribes, and we're just super hopeful that that will produce some resources from NOAA's most recent program. And there's additional examples around culverts and other things that we're working on. So I'd love to put you in touch with any contacts we can. And the same goes for everybody in the organization. That's I would hope one of the benefits of being a member. There's a whole bunch of fantastic voluntary habitat project work going on in the watershed every day. And those sets of projects are not necessarily pet projects or something randomly drawn. They're all driven by the science, mostly as outlined in the Chinook recovery plan and other pieces. And our job is to make them as good as possible technically, and to vet them to make sure that they are consistent with the values of the local community, right? So not all of you are in the Habitat Project business every day. And so we thought we would just run through some high-level snapshots of the projects that are currently going on or just recently completed. And if it queues up any questions for you, feel free to get in touch with the project sponsor, of course, or Andrea or I or John, and we'll point you to the right person or try to answer the questions we can. And we'll draw a nexus between these projects and the recovery plan science. So we're going to start down in the estuary. And this first slide is a busy slide. It does show recently completed projects, or the top number 3. Brit Slough in orange was a project of the Skagit Fisheries Enhancement Group on DFW land, working with other interests. And congratulations, Allison, on finishing that project in 2021. I know that there's a lot of planting and maintenance still going on out there. And then also the South Fork Channel construction project has just been completed this year. It's in yellow. And that's another very large scale excavation and channel creation project that we're going to monitor closely to figure out if we can utilize more of the land waterward of the dikes to benefit fish. One of the things the ag community has been asking us about for some time, and we just didn't have the information, and we hope we'll get that information. So congratulations to the county. I think the Fish Enhancement Group has been helping them with the planting, so definitely a team effort there. And then, of course, North Leckway Island down in near Stanwood and Department of Fish and Wildlife. So thank you to those project sponsors for all the committed work. It's definitely helping the bottom line. We know that the Swinomish Indian tribal community has been working on and moving towards one of the smaller but an important Swinomish channel fill removal, phase 3. That's number 4. And then, of course, as I referenced Jenny Baker's work earlier, she's been working very diligently with the Department of Fish and Wildlife and her advisory groups on projects 5, 6, and 7, Milltown Island Phase 2, and adaptively managing the Wiley Slough site to raise the dikes to improve flood management down there. So thank you so much, DFW. And your partners on that. And those are the projects. Wiley Slough's funded now, but Milltown and Island, we're hopeful to hear any day about nearly full funding from NOAA, and people are pretty optimistic that might happen. I would be remiss if I didn't add Smokehouse, 130 acres on the reservation, led by Swinomish Indian Tribal Community and SRSC again. They're still in design phase, but that's a project we're looking forward to in the near future. And then also SRC and Swinomish Tribe working very hard on the McGlynn Causeway and jetty connectivity, so that we know that fish and sediment and I guess saltwater, freshwater are moving through those man-made barriers as best as possible, so that we're taking better benefits from the Padilla Bay area for rearing habitat. So that's another great project. And then I think we wanted to, from the board level, continue to emphasize that we're strong supporters of the Estuary Restoration Strategic Assessment that was completed by NOAA and DFW and who am I missing? Missing somebody.
Nature Conservancy.
Thank you, TNC. And there's a lot of good concepts that were prioritized there to reduce the impacts to landowners and the agricultural community. So we're just optimistic that all the public lands that are restorable are on this list. We have put them all into play as far as maximizing restoration within the community's values in the estuary. And really, if we're going to make progress beyond the public lands, that's going to be done collaboratively. It's going to be done with landowners and with their interests, and making sure that their interests are prioritized at the same level. So that is just kind of a slide here of the outcomes of the Estuary Restoration Strategic Assessment, and we're just looking forward to more of that conversation. So that's kind of an overview of the estuary and the work that's going on. Sometimes it doesn't feel like there's much going on, but there's actually quite a bit. And of course, there's more to do, but we're well placed to work on that.
Richard, there's in the chat, David, a couple things. I'll go to David first, since it's which of these estuary projects were funded through the Skagit Watershed Council? I think you hit on it, but if you could kind of refresh.
Yeah, let's see if I can go backwards. All of them except the Wiley Slough dike raise.
Right.
And McGlynn actually came off the surfboard list because SRSC and the Watershed Council worked with NIFWIF to fund it so that we could fund further down our remaining list. So all of these have a surfboard nexus, David.
And Jenny pointed out that the Wiley dike repair will be completed in 2023, which is good news as well.
Well, as you all salmon experts know now, after the Salmon Science Series, that it's important that juveniles have rearing habitat in the bay as well, whether they're leaving or just not finding enough room in the freshwater and estuary rearing areas. Then they go out to these nearshore areas and the pocket estuaries. And so we have a map here that shows the north part of Skagit Bay, and the small dots are completed projects for the most part in the main stem and estuary here. But what we wanted to call attention to is that we, the collective we, the royal we, are working on additional pocket estuary rearing habitat in the bay. So Milk Beach is a large project, 20 acres. The county and the Skagit River System Cooperative and Swinomish Tribe are working on together. Thank you for your partnership. And Bowman Bay is a project feasibility being led by the Skagit Fisheries Enhancement Group to see if they can create a stable opening with that pocket estuary for fish to use. And down in Race Lagoon, some culverts on County Road that could be updated to pass fish and sediment and water. So we continue to work in other priority rearing habitats. I don't know if there's any questions or additional comments on those 3 planned projects that we're working on in the near future. And this slide is going to be a little bit too busy. Sorry about that, but we wanted to reflect the chapter 10 freshwater rearing habitat and all the great work that's gone on in the main stem with some additional work to do. Again, the small dots are mostly completed surfboard projects. The purple dots are areas of the current focus of planned work. And so starting down in the bottom of the system, there's feasibility work going on at DeBay Slough. And there is a planning effort being led by the county and the Upper Skagit Tribe in East Fork Nookachamps. And of course, there's a lot of work going on in Hanson Creek with the Swinomish Tribe at SRC and Upper Skagit. There's also work going on in Skyu and Ross Island Reach is one of our priority reaches in the middle Skagit. There's a lot of room for potential fish benefit there. And that project being led by SRC is, again, like Ursa, is trying to find ways to provide the most benefit for fish with the least impact or change of behavior to our human communities as well. So we're really interested to see how that's going to shake out. Lower Day Slough, several of you project sponsors are working in that area to improve fish passage and culvert replacements. Thank you. Cedar Grove is a recently completed project from the county. It's another off-channel rearing area, and they've replaced impassable culvert with a pedestrian bridge and created new community access, which is fantastic. And then there's a large floodplain project in Barnaby and O'Brien Reaches that are happening. And also a couple of one Presentine recently completed. I hope you all have been out to Presentine Park and seen the great work there the Fish Enhancement Group did. And then another project being starting next year with Upper Skagit, DFW, and the co-managers working in the Cascade floodplain. Finally, we've been working on, and I hope at the next council meeting, we'll talk about the SOC and all the opportunities there to protect and restore habitat and what would provide the most benefit with the least impact to the community. So we're super excited about that, and I hope you'll join us next meeting to hear more about that one. So that's chapter 10, where we're trying to restore rearing habitat for juvenile Chinook before they're forced out of the system due to what they call density dependent limitations. Well, I think what we're showing is that there's some priority areas in the we call it the Skyu Ross Island Reach area. There's a lot going on. And in the Barnaby Reach area, and with a new planning focus in the SOC as well. And those are our big rearing main stem areas. We feel like that's pretty strategic, and it's following the recovery plan, and they're all tier 1 projects in our strategic approach. And then last but not least, chapter 9 is about spawning habitats. And for the most part, what that references is the hydrology and the sedimentation processes that had been impacted before we knew that the building roads and timber cutting without careful management practices were leading to mass wasting and a lot of landslides. And so this chapter 9 is really about protecting the headwaters to make sure that they're being managed appropriately. But there are also references in chapter 9 to spawning habitat and fish passage culverts and alluvial fans. And so, of course, we have a couple of examples of that. One way up in the upper system, which I know Colin from SRC has been working on diligently with the Forest Service and other stakeholders, is an alluvial fan on Tennis Creek, where they're looking at ways to bridge the floodplain and restore that alluvial fan. And there's another project in the Nookachamps it's similar, smaller in scale, and that's being worked on with a private landowner and the Skagit Fisheries Enhancement Group. So you'll hear more about chapter 9 and 10 in 2023, but know that we have projects that are implementing those chapters.
I think what it really does show the watershed-based approach that everyone's taking to Chinook and other species as well in the water in the Skagit.
And I probably should acknowledge the limited framework there, because those were surfboard funded projects, kind of to David's point, but there's lots of other initiatives that are consistent and supportive. So Susan's on the screen here, so I'll pick on her. For Terra, that they've been working very closely with the town of Hamilton and several of you members, additional members. And we're very hopeful that their Floodplains by Design project will be funded this year. And that's tightly coordinated with some of the salmon recovery projects. So thank you, Susan, and other folks like that I didn't mention in that list. And I think I would be remiss, because I forgot to, but I'd be remiss not to remember and mention, I did not put on that list all the fantastic acquisition and riparian work that's happening throughout the system, as well as driven by our strategic approach and protection strategy update and riparian analyses. So maybe in a future meeting, we can introduce or share that information as well.